In Exodus chapter 3, God calls out to Moses from a burning bush, and he commissions him to be his prophet and his agent through whom he will deliver his people Israel from Egypt. And Moses responds to this calling, as anyone does in the Old Testament when God commissions them to be his prophet or his agent. He politely declines. I don't think you've got the right guy, God. Maybe if you go one or two mountains up to the north, maybe you'll find somebody a little bit more qualified, but not me. And so for the next couple chapters, we see God politely and patiently responding to a series of doubts and questions and rebuttals by Moses before Moses eventually finally gives in and agrees to act on God's behalf. And one of these questions that Moses asks is particularly significant to our understanding of God, not just in the Old Testament, but the entire Bible. In chapter 3, verse 13, Moses says to God, "When I come to the Israelites and I say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" You see, the Israelites have been living in Egypt by this time for hundreds of years, and they are surrounded by dozens and dozens of gods and goddesses who all have names and faces and forms. Anubis and Osiris and Ptah and Horus and Sekhmet and so on and so forth. And so here comes Moses walking down the road and saying, "Oh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has sent me to deliver you." Well, the natural reaction and response of a people who's been living in this climate and this culture is to say, well, which God? That one? That one? Somebody else? What's his name? What can you tell me about him? In response to this question, God says this starting in verse 14. It says, God said to Moses, and this is the Hebrew phrase, Eyeh asher eyeh, which is sometimes translated, I am who I am, or I will be who I will be. He continues by saying, thus you shall say to the Israelites, Eyeh, I am, right, sent me to you. And he says further, this is what you shall say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has sent me to you. Now, when you see the phrase the Lord in your Old Testament, the vast majority of the time, that is a polite translation, a respectful translation of the name of God. And we don't even really know how to pronounce this name anymore. We just simply know the four consonants of the name, Yod, He, Vav, Hey, and in really nerdy circles, this is called the tetragrammaton, which is a fancy way of saying four letters, right? Now, it used to be believed that this name was pronounced Jehovah, and that's why you see that name show up in a bunch of worship songs and even in Indiana Jones movies and all sorts of over the place, right? But the problem is that was a misunderstanding of something that Hebrew scribes were doing when they were writing down this name. That when they wrote these four consonants down, they would intersperse these consonants with the vowel sounds from the Hebrew word Adonai, right? Which simply means the Lord. And so when a scribe was reading through the text and he saw that would trigger and protect him from accidentally saying the divine name out of respect. And instead, that would alert him that he needed to say Adonai instead, the Lord, which is a tradition that has continued in practice through all of the various translations, even down to our English translations today. That's why we read the Lord instead of the name. The closest approximation that scholars now believe that the divine name was pronounced is something closer to Yahweh, and this is why sometimes you hear the name referred to that way. But what is God doing when he says, you shall say to them, yes, this is my name, but let me also give you this kind of phrase, Eyeh asher eyeh, I am who I am. Well, both this name, the actual divine name, Yahweh or however it was pronounced, and the word Eyeh both come from the Hebrew verb simply that means to be. right? And so what God is doing is kind of punning on his own name to try to teach Moses, and through Moses, the Israelites, an important lesson about our understanding of God. You see, what God, I think, understands is that behind the question that Moses was pondering about, well, what is his name? What can you tell me about him? Who is this God who has sent you? Is the same kind of temptation that today theologians and philosophers and preachers and pastors and professors and studiers of the Bible alike can fall prey to. The temptation that if we study enough, and if we think enough, and if we work and we can reason out who God is, and we can predict and understand, have a firm grasp of what he should be like, and when we reach that place, we can say, aha, now I've got him. Now I understand. And that's not to say that God is capricious or random or kind of completely malicious or anything like that. He is faithful, that his characteristics of love and holiness and justice and righteousness, those are the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And yet what God is saying is that if you try to put me in a box, if you try to put a label on me and think that by putting that on me or putting me in that place or on this pedestal that you can reason me out or you can predict what I'm going to do, guess what? You're in for a surprise. What does God do? Well, God does what God is, and God is what God does. We cannot fully wrap our brains around God. He will always surprise us in the end. That's not something to be scared of. It's something to be cherished and to appreciate, especially when that God is placed in a few chapters later in Exodus up against all of the other gods of Egypt. You don't want a God to fight your battles who you can fully understand, who you can out-predict or out-maneuver. You want a God who is bigger than what you can possibly imagine. God will be who he will be. God is who God is.